Folks, this is Screws and Studs, and welcome on into this painting tutorial of probably one of my most favorite OG models, which are the Terminators, specifically the Thunderhammer and Storm Shield variant of the Terminators. So by following this painting tutorial, I'm sorry, again, you're not going to get that gold demon that you want, but at least you're going to get a beautiful figure when you display it out on the tabletop, when you are going to be amazing your opponents with it. I'm basically going to be teaching you how to paint this model. However, save time while painting it as well. You're not going to be painting every single one of the details on the model, mainly because of time savings. Again, while these are elite troops, you're going to be painting multitudes of these things, so you want to save time. The second thing I'm going to be teaching you is how to pick some details on the armor of the Terminator so that it can stand out from the bland monotony of the, in this case, the red. I also will try to limit the amount of paints that I use for this tutorial. And with that being said, let's jump right in onto the tutorial.
Alright, ahead of you is a list of all the paints that you will need to wash away the gray, so feel free to pause the video. I also apologize, but I seem to have lost the video where I painted the gold areas with Retributor armor, so you're going to want to paint the Purity Seal medals as well as the gold Aquila and the halo up top with Retributor armor, and then the wings on the Storm Shield as you see over here. And then when you're done painting those areas with Warpstone Glow, you're going to next want to paint the banners as well as the Crux Terminatus with Ushabti Bone, and these are the only areas on this particular Assault Terminator that you're going to be using this particular color. Typically with most Terminators, you can pretty much use Ushabti Bone all across the board to paint these Crux Terminatus. And after you're done with that, we're going to be using Abaddon Black to paint the vents, the Thunderhammer, as well as the armor areas in between the major armor plates so that they can stand out a little bit more. Not to mention, you're also going to want to paint the vent area at the front of the helmet for this Assault Terminator. Now at this point in the video, I'm not actually going to paint every single part on this Thunderhammer because I want to show you exactly where you need to paint these places Abaddon Black. So it's going to be the middle of the shaft of the hammer as well as the top of the hammer, the areas in which the wire is connected to the hammer, and so on and so forth. And next, you're going to want to take out your pot of Stormhost Silver to paint the leses on the helmet as well as the blood drops, because this is a technique that I like to use a lot on any model that has either a lens or a blood drop because it actually saves time. Typically, if this was a character model, I would actually take the time to try to gem this thing, but since it is not, and I'm going to be painting a lot of these things, I choose to use this method to save time. So next we're going to paint the helmet areas, the Thunderhammer and Storm Shield with Lead Belcher. I'm going to show you the areas in which you are going to be painting with Lead Belcher, which includes, I guess, that sensor part, the helmet area, the medallion that's hanging off the hip of the Terminator, as well as the Thunderhammer itself. So you're going to want to paint the end of it where the Thunderhammer connects to the armor, as well as where it goes on the wires, and then the shaft of the Thunderhammer, as well as the wings and the tip of the Thunderhammer you're going to be painting with the Lead Belcher. Not to mention the whole entire Storm Shield is also going to be painted with Lead Belcher. So now we are done with the base coat, and this is what it looks like. I know it looks a little bit rough, so we are going to have to do some touching up in a little bit. So the next thing that we're going to do is shade all the areas that were painted with Retributor armor. So that includes the Purity Seal medallions, the wings that you see on the Storm Shield, as well as the Iron Halo up top or the Halo up top, and then the banners and the Crux Terminatus. Moving on, we're going to be shading the Purity Seal ribbons with Bealtan Green, and thankfully there is not that much surface area that we're going to be needing this Bealtan Green. It's just in basically 3 different areas, as you see, on the body of the Terminator as well as on the Storm Shield. And then the next thing that we're going to do is use Vulpes Green to shade the Thunderhammer grip. And I like to use this method a lot to really deepen the look of that grip and to give it a little bit more flavor and character. So next we're going to be painting the blood drops with Blood Angels Red, and I'm using basically it straight out of the pot. However, if you want the silver to show up a little bit more, you can either use a couple things, which is one, the technical contrast medium, or two, you can just thin it with water into 1-to-1 ratio, which is perfectly fine. So in this video I decided to use the newly released Nuln Oil shade, and I found that using this was actually fairly different from the old Nuln Oil. So this one has a little bit of a softer shade or glow. I don't know exactly how to determine it, but you would have to use it yourself. It just looks softer. And if you use the old Nuln Oil, everything would be very, very sharp in contrast. And as you're looking right now in the recesses, everything just looks softer. Maybe later on I'll think of doing some sort of video that's going to literally compare and contrast the old Nuln Oil to the new Nuln Oil. So maybe look to the future for that particular video. So the next thing that you're going to want to do is to highlight the areas that you painted with Retributor armor and then shaded with Reikland Flesh Shade with Auric armor. And I find using that to be a very subtle shade, and you're going to be painting basically the tips of those areas. The next thing that we're going to do is to highlight the Purity Seal ribbons with Sybarite Green, and you're going to want to pick up the edges of those Purity Seals using the side of your brush, not necessarily the tip of your brush, as it may look like right now. If you actually use the edge of your brush, you're going to get more clean and crisp lines like you're seeing right now. So next you're going to want to highlight those areas in which you painted over with Reikland Flesh Shade, as you can see over here with Ushabti Bone. You can also opt to paint with something a little bit more light, which is Screaming Skull, but I decided to keep the number of paints that you'll need to use to a little bit of a minimum. Alright, once you are done with that step, you're going to want to highlight the Thunderhammer grip with Pink Horror, and you want to try to capture the tops of these triangles and trapezoids, I suppose, with the Pink Horror. And then after you're done with that, we're going to be highlighting areas on the Thunderhammer with Dawnstone. As you see me do right here with my two index fingers, I'm actually putting them together to actually get more of stabilization. When you're painting, it's always good to have this triangle of power, so I say. So typically when I paint, I put my two elbows on the table and I have the figure in front of me when I paint. In order to actually stabilize it more, I actually form a smaller triangle with the miniature in between my hands and then put my two index fingers together with greater stabilization. So the next thing you're going to want to do is to paint the areas that are at the highest points with Wild Rider Red. I know that previously you saw me painting with the Evil Sun Scarlet. Now, when you want to highlight these things, you want to make sure to put the initial highlight, which is the Evil Sun Scarlet, as a fairly medium kind of thickness. And then when you're painting the highest areas, you want to make sure that the area is going to be thinner than your Evil Sun Scarlet. Alright, we are almost done painting this model, so the next thing you're going to want to do is paint the base with RHINOX hide. You can also choose to use another color, but just make sure that when you are using this base color to actually be uniform all across your whole entire army, so it could look a little bit more uniform. Next thing you want to do is add texture to the base with a Grelin Earth. Same thing. There are plenty of textured paints that you can use for your army, but just make sure for cohesiveness that you're going to be using the same texture paints. And I don't know if you've heard me say this before, with texture paints, it does take quite a long time to dry. So one thing that I do is to actually put that model in front of a space heater. Obviously I watch it, but that thing dries up real quick within about 4 to 5 minutes instead of like 20 to 30 minutes. So the next thing you're going to want to do is to highlight the base with this dry brush, and you also want to make sure that about 95% of your paint is removed. As you can see here, I did not do a very good job of removing the paint from my dry brush, so it looks very uneven and splotchy over here. which actually is a no-no, so I basically covered that screw up with a little bit of grass. And we are finally done with this miniature. It should look exactly like this if you follow all the directions on this tutorial. And this is a close-up of what it should look like, and I think it looks pretty damn good with some but not all the details picked out. And finally, this is the full squad that you're seeing over here, ready to smash. So this is Brews and Studs, and I really hope that you enjoyed this painting video. Look for more in the future, and I'll see you all in the next one.